Alright, so with multiplying decimals, what we are going to do is basically treat the problem at first like it doesn't have any decimals in it at all. We're going to write out the multiplication problem like normal, and then we're going to multiply this as if there were no decimals in the problem. So with adding and subtracting yesterday, we wanted to make sure the decimal points lined up. Do not do that with multiplying, because it's probably going to just mess up your problem. Instead of making sure they line up, we're just going to write it normal. And we're going to focus on where the decimal point goes after we're done multiplying. Focus on the decimal point after we are done multiplying. And the way that we're going to do that is these three steps right here. Get those down, we'll talk about it. It'll make more sense once we go through our examples as well. So these three steps, make sure that you've got them down, and we're going to just look at them. I think it's easier to explain them as we do an example, as opposed to just looking at the words. So have those down, and we'll talk about these three steps here in a second. So our first example is going to be 2.5 times 1.25. First thing is to make sure the number with more digits goes on top. I mean, technically you could do it the other way, but I think this is just how we've multiplied before. And so this will make more sense. The number that has more digits, so the one that has more numbers in it, needs to go on top. Because with multiplying, does order matter? Does it matter which number we put first with multiplying? No. So we can switch up the order, and it's not going to change anything. So in our case on this first one, 1.25 is going to go on top when we multiply. 2.5 is going to go on the bottom. So notice I did not line up the decimal points because it doesn't matter. You don't have to line the decimal points up for this. Then we just multiply like normal. So think of this as 125 and this 25. Just multiply like usual. So 25 there. So once we are done multiplying, we should have 3125. And then we're going to figure out where does that decimal point need to go. So looking back at those first three steps that you just wrote down, the first thing that we did was take both numbers that we're multiplying and count basically how many numbers come after the decimal point. So at 1.25, there are two numbers. And 2.5, there's one number that comes after the decimal point. 2 and 1. And for right now, I like to write it to the side here, because this kind of shows visually what we're doing. Second step was to add these two numbers up. So we're going to put 3 down here. Third step was we're going to go in our answer. We're going to start at the far right and we're going to count to the left whatever this number is. So we're going to start here. We're going to count 1, 2, 3. That's where our decimal point goes. 3.125. Now for this one, different than yesterday, it says to round our product to the nearest hundredth. What number is in the hundredths spot? What number, Joseph? 2. So now we're going to look at the number after 2, which is a 5. 5 means we've got to round it up. So our final answer is going to be 3.13. 3.13. So especially with multiplying and dividing, pay attention to what it says about rounding. Because we're going to have to round quite a bit today. Okay, so let's look at our next one. 10.375 times 0.65. So 10.375 goes up top. If you've got a 0 point something, the 0 is on the right of the decimal point, you don't have to write the 0 when you're multiplying, because anything times 0 is just going to be a bunch of zeros. So we could just put 0.65, like that. And then we multiply like usual. Get 674375. Write it over here. Now we figure out where the decimal point's going to go. So there are 3 numbers to the right of our first one. There are 2 numbers to the right of our decimal point. Our second number we're multiplying. Add those 2 up, and we're going to have to end up counting 5 times to the left. 5 times to the left. So we're going to start at the very right after this 5, count 5 times. It's going to go right in between the 6 and the 7. Right in between the 6 and the 7. Now we round to the nearest hundredth once again. So 4 is in the hundredth spot. 3 is right beside it. If a 3 comes after it, we don't have to round, so it's going to stay at 6.74. 6.74. All right, let's look at one more together. If we've got a negative times a positive, we know our answer is going to be what? A negative. Remember, the positive and negative rules still apply. If you want, you can still use the triangle as well, with 2 minuses and 1 plus. That's going to work for decimals also, for multiplying and dividing. So we know our answer is going to be negative. I'm going to go ahead and put a negative right there. What number should go on top when we multiply here? Which number should go on top when we multiply? AJ?
6.
Yep, 3.284 just got more digits in it. It's got one more number. So that's going to go up top. And then we multiply. what would you say, kind of as we're multiplying this out, what do you all think is one of the most common mistakes with multiplying decimals? Anybody have an idea? Like getting the numbers?
Like how many digits like you're multiplying?
That has to do with it. I would say the most common mistake is students forget to add the 0 on the second row. They forget to put 2 zeros on the third row when you're multiplying by the hundreds place. So don't forget, on the second row multiplication, add a 0. Third row, you add 2 zeros, and then you start multiplying. Okay, so don't forget about that. That's probably the most common mistake that I see. Which you all know that, you just forget about it a lot. And then we will add these up. We get 2, 2, 9, 2, 2, 3, 2. A lot of zeros. Okay, how many times do we need to count to the left to put our decimal place? How many times do we need to count to the left to put our decimal place in the number? Zach? 5 times, right? 3 after the first number, plus 2 after the second. So we're going to count 5 times to the left. So start here at the very right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we get negative 22.92232. Round to the nearest hundredth. Should be that first 2, but we're not going to have to round up at all. It's going to be negative 22.92. And one other thing before you do a couple on your own. As you multiply these, just ask yourself, does this answer make sense? 6.98 is really close to 7, and 7 times 3 is 21. And so if we're doing something really close to 7 times something a little bigger than 3, we should get something close to 21. If you got 229.2, that wouldn't make sense. Or if you got 2.29, that wouldn't make sense either. But 22 does make sense. It makes sense that that would be our answer. So just ask yourself, does this answer make sense? Okay. You all go ahead and finish off your examples. So do the last 3 on your own. Finish off those examples there. Alright, for the first one that you all did, 0.275 times 10. Whenever you multiply that out and get your answer, are the numbers changing in this 0.275? As far as you still have a 2, 7, and 5 in that order? You should, right? You should get 2750. Where's the decimal point going to go? Vincent? Behind the 2. Yep. You're going to move it over 3 times. 3 here plus 0. So there's no decimal point in 10. So you're going to move it 3 times to the left and get 2.75. So what's the only thing that changed there? We multiplied by 10. What was the only thing that changed? Thalen? The what? Yeah, where the decimal point went. So one little shortcut that maybe you saw is when you multiply by 10, all you have to do is move the decimal point 1 time to the right. Move the decimal. One time to the right. If we multiplied by 100, how many times should we move the decimal point to the right? 2 times, right? Because you move it twice to get to the 100 spot. We multiply by 1,000, we would move the decimal point 3 times to the right. Yep. So anytime you're multiplying by a power of 10, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, you move the decimal point that many times to the right. So the numbers aren't actually changing, just the decimal placement is what's changing there. All right, we got our next one, negative 12.4 times negative 5.78. A negative times a negative, we know our answer is going to be a positive. So it doesn't matter which one comes on top, but make sure that the 4 and the 8 are matched up, make sure the 2 and the 7 line up, make sure the 5 and the 1 line up. Okay, when we multiply this out, we should get, actually I'm not going to put the decimal point there. That's 71762. How many times are we going to move our decimal point? How many times do we move our decimal point, guys? 3 times, yes. Once in 12.4, twice in 5.78. So we're going to move it 3 times to the left. And it's going to go in between that 1 and 7. And then round your answer to the nearest 100, which is going to stay at 71.76. So 71.76 after you round is what you're going to get. I know I went through these too quickly, but if you have any questions, I can come around and look at your math here in a second. Make sure that whenever you did that third row, you added 2 zeros before you started to multiply. All right, so for our last one, you get a job that pays $8.45 an hour, and you work 12 and a half hours on a weekend. How much money do you make? So for this, we're going to take 8.45, multiply it by 12.5. And then we would multiply this out. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. Make sure your work matches up with mine. Hopefully I don't make a mistake. Get 105,625. Where's our decimal point going to go here? Bill? after this first 5, okay, we're going to move it over twice plus once, so move over 3 times. Do we need to round this? What are we talking about? What is this 105? How much what? Money. Do we have to round money? Yes, we have to round it to the nearest cent, right? Do you ever go up to the cash register and they say it's going to be $105.625? No. So we need to round, always round money to the nearest cent or the nearest hundred. There should be 2 numbers after the decimal point when we're talking about money. So we're going to round this 0.625 up to 0.63. So our final answer needs to be $105.63. Questions dealing with money. A lot of times they are not going to say round your answer. You just got to know that if it's money, you round it to the nearest cent. So we got to get in the habit of seeing that, understanding it's money, and then go ahead and round up to that nearest cent. All right, any questions on this one? Okay.